coming. The piece you will see today, written by Burrows, is the result of a Sisu Theatre project over the winter, the Dead Character Study. I would like to thank the Malcolm Island Art Society for support of the project. Immediately following the performance, we'll have a short talk back if anyone has any questions. And please make sure you've turned off any cell phones. And now, to set the stage. In 1927, Eric Blair, the future George Orwell, is back in London and has left the Burma police to try and become a writer. He meets his longtime friend, Cyril Connolly, and they retire to a pub for a drink. Connolly is just getting established as a book reviewer. Orwell has written nothing. They order halves of bitter and sit in the corner by the fire.
Cheers, old man.
Cheers.
You're looking well, Conley.
Unfortunately, the same is not true of you, Blair. We may have been half-starved at school, but none of us managed to achieve the cadaver-like physique you currently display.
Dengue fever, I'm afraid. One of the perks of life in Burma. It's knocked me about a bit, but I'm feeling stronger by the day.
Just one of life's blows, I hazard. Rather like the beatings we received at school. Instills character.
I would have preferred that they were less about our character and more about our intelligence. And I don't believe you can beat that into a person.
Oh, but they would have tried.
Undoubtedly. The cane was their universal educational tool. They could beat things into one and beat things out of one. Sadly, many of the things they beat out of one are the very characteristics that make one a decent human being.
Which accounts for the moral qualities of most of the Conservative Party.
How can you say that, Blair? Finally, didn't you sign on as a special constable during the general strike?
One of my more egregious errors. I only wanted to be of some use, and I could hardly pass myself off as a minor.
God, Conley, my considerable mental acuity is incapable of conjuring that image. You would easier have passed yourself off as a Martian. Have you kept in touch with any of the others?
Well, Cecil Beaton is making a bit of a name for himself. Photography, painting, set design. You remember what a dab hand he was with any of the visual arts.
Yes. Yes, he is possessed of a great sensibility, which is another of the valuable traits they overlooked in school.
I don't know as they overlooked it so much as simply being unaware of its existence.
Yes, quite. Your review of Lawrence Sterne in the New Statesman was quite good. You were right to highlight his anti-clericism. The Censors had their way with him in 1750, and I fear they would today as well.
Aye. McCarthy wants me to write regularly for them. The money is welcome, but I won't do anything that interferes with my wanderlust. And you, Blair? You always espouse the desirability of a literary life. What are your plans?
Well, I want desperately to write, but I have no idea of how to proceed. One simply gets on with it, I imagine.
Yes, well, I'm messing about with a novel, but it's refusing to cooperate. Keeps flying off in directions I disapprove of. Rather like a recalcitrant child in a museum. Have you a project of any sort?
No, I know exactly how I want to write, but haven't a clue as to what to write.
Well, your essays at Eton were notable for their clarity, if not their moral rectitude.
Well, I was determined to escape from cliché and to avoid my classmates' propensity for important-sounding words.
Still, some multisyllabic words are simply gorgeous, serendipitous, mendacious, pusillanimous. They're a pleasure to pronounce.
Yes, they have their place, Conley, but must not be allowed to escape lest they usurp decent Anglo-Saxon language.
I'm afraid my editors don't share your enthusiasm for the virtues of simplicity. But what's so very irksome to me is how they cut and slash my verbiage like literary Jack the Rippers.
Editors must be ruthless. It's any wood that can be cut must be cut. Some woods must die so that the greater work may live. Also, never use the passive voice when you can use the active. Also, never use foreign phrases or jargon words or scientific terms if you can think of an everyday English equivalent.
Surely, Blair, a slavish devotion to your rules would result in the sort of prose you would disown.
I'll grant you that, Conley. Obviously, discard any of these rules rather than say anything outright barbarous.
The New Statesmen have so far avoided outright barbarism.
But you must be on your guard, Conley. Semper vigilans, semper tutus.
As you're well aware, Blair, Englishmen of our class generally lack capabilities.
Conley, you must not speak of our common class. I am upper-lower middle class, and you are lower-upper middle class.
Quite right. But what I was about to say, I desperately hope that one day we will have the courage to betray our class. I know that you will, but I fear that I won't.
If I can do that, Conley, I shall satisfy myself that my existence has been in some small way justified. December 14, 1927. My dearest Orwell, I'm enjoying myself in London. There are so many people about that one can safely observe them without the messiness of having to interact with them. I suppose that in this propensity for human observation, I run the risk of becoming a sort of outsider. I fell into that role in Burma. My fellow officers were as foreign to me as the locals that we were meant to police. Consequently, I really found it impossible to become close to any of them. To put a slightly better face on it, rather than becoming an outsider, I'm merely succumbing to my roots in natural history and indulging in a sort of investigation and classification of human beings. A rum lot, most of them, unfortunately unlovable, but I suppose they would say the same of me. I do admit, though, that I miss the family. You and Marjorie were always a good counterweight to my gloominess. And I can honestly say that I enjoyed our childhood years in the country and the few friends we had. Are you still in touch with Jacinta Buddicombe? We used to write the most ghastly poems together, but I always enjoyed her company. Do you suppose I should write her? I hope she's not involved with anyone. I fear that youthful compatibility may not translate into any sort of adult affection. Still, I must confess, though, that my thoughts have turned to marriage, even though I'm obviously in no position to support a wife. The truth is, I would love to have at least one child, and a wife seems to be the usual means to that end. Although, I'm not at all well versed in the care and handling of the fair sex. If it wasn't taught at Eton, I have very little knowledge of it. Which, sad fact, is compounded by the old dog new tricks conundrum. Do you happen to know any tutors on the subject of desirable young women? The charming of? Even if Father and I were close, it is inconceivable that we should speak of matters like this. I hope you and Mother have a better relationship. Do you suppose that English public schools, which so interfere with normal child-parent relationships, are therefore so successful at producing military people? They do say that the battles of Britain are won on the playing fields of Eton, but I think that many of our military successes are due to a careful selection of adversaries. Enfield rifles versus cowhide shields and sharp sticks gives the purveyors of empire a bit of an edge. I'm taking tea this evening without Nellie. So give her your best wishes. Please give mine to Mother, Father, and Marjorie. Regards, Eric. To a justified existence.
Here, here. They're still clapping. Bouquets?
Thank you very much. So you can just have a seat. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
Did he find a wife?
Eventually he did. Unfortunately, he it was quite a love affair. And they actually went together to the Spanish Civil War, fought together, barely escaped with their lives together. And then back in Britain, they adopted a child. So for a short period of time, Orwell was really happy with his life. But then his wife went in for what was supposed to be fairly routine surgery and died on the operating table. So he was left with this young boy to raise, and unfortunately he didn't stick around that much longer either. He died at, I think, 3 years old.
What, pneumonia or lung cancer or?
No, it was tuberculosis.
Yeah. You were alluding to that with your questions.
I'm so subtle.
It's those Basil cigarettes. He never gave them up.
What was your process of deciding on exploring George Orwell?
Well, I've always been a fan of George Orwell. More his nonfiction than his fiction. I've read all of his nonfiction, and he was a brilliant man. He could express himself brilliantly, and he was at the forefront of some of the major sort of philosophical struggles of the late 20th century. Sort of, communism versus socialism versus fascism, and he was obviously a huge influence on his time.
Any other questions about the process or anything? No? No, yes.
How did you choose this particular moment?
It just, when I was doing my research, it mentioned the fact that this meeting did actually take place. And it just struck me that this would be a good time to explore some of the issues that would lead into his development as a writer, and the type of things that he chose to write about.
So how did he get to Animal Farm?
got to Animal Farm because he was vehemently anti-communist for a couple of reasons. One of which was that the Russian the Russian Bolsheviks were running the resistance during the Spanish Civil War, and they screwed it up. They screwed it up because they were more concerned about the future of the Bolshevik Party than they were about actually winning the battle against fascism. Also, the Bolsheviks imprisoned, tortured, and killed some of Orwell's friends in Barcelona, and Orwell and his wife were lucky to escape with their lives. So he was vehemently anti-communist at a time when most of the British left was still somewhat in love with the Russian rebellion. So he wanted to shine a light on the nature of communism and how inherently anti-democratic it is. And that was the whole raison d'etre for Animal Farm.
I have a question for you. Are you considering making this a larger play?
Well, again, when I was doing my research, I came across a very small but strange incident that Orwell referred to in a couple of letters that he wrote to his friends. And what had happened was Orwell had a job looking after a young man who was what we would call developmentally challenged. Orwell referred to him as a congenital idiot. But he used to take this young boy on long walks in the country. And one day, on one of these walks, he found a box. And it was sort of a dollhouse. There was small handmade furniture in this box, along with some dolls and some very small women's clothing that would fit the dolls. And there was a brief note in it, and the note said, "This isn't bad, is it?" And so Orwell didn't really know what to do with this box, so he put it back under the hedge. When he went back there a day or two later, he found that it was gone. So he actually considered, because of his background as a policeman in Burma, and this was a very small village. There was only like 80 people in the village. He said he seriously considered trying to search out the person who had made this box, and try and get some idea of what was behind it. But he never did. He never followed up on that. But I was kind of intrigued by that, and I'm thinking of writing a book, not a play, but a book that would explore that mystery, which could be fun, but I haven't started it yet.
Anything else? I just want to end with, Fred, would you mind telling about in rehearsal when you found that postcard?
Oh, my pleasure. I was looking for a chance. Thanks, Tammy. I was gonna. Yeah, this is sort of like a show and tell, but when we were doing this, I was thinking, what props do I have that would look believable? And I thought, oh, my dad's notepad from the army. So I took it out and brought it, and I was showing it to Bruce. And it's complete with writing pad and postcards and old pencil and for the Christmas and the New Year, best wishes for Christmas and New Year from friends of the regiment. And what I'd forgotten about in here, I was digging around, and where is it now? And there was a postcard from, who is that? George and
Queen Mother.
George and Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And it says on the back, with our best wishes for Christmas 1939, may God bless you and protect you, Elizabeth. Oh yeah, Elizabeth and George. And I'm looking at it, and well, number one, I thought, serendipitous. What a great word. But then I happened to look at the photo credit, and it's Cecil Beaton, which is the character that Bruce wrote into the thing. I mean, what are the chances of that? I never used it, but I brought it in case I had a chance to. Thank you.
Future consideration.
Yeah.
Great. much for coming, and thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.